It's October, so you know what that means. Scary movies. Woo! They Live Inside Us is brought to us by director Michael Bailiff and stars James Morris as Jake. Strong name. Jake is a struggling writer that for inspiration decides to move into a murder house called the Booth House with his daughter. Sounds like a great idea. When I say move in, I'm not 100% sure if they actually moved into the house or if they're just kind of staying there for a couple of days. The movie doesn't really make that clear. Either way, he's there to write a horror screenplay, and he thought that it would be best to go stay in this house that apparently these notorious murders happened in 30 years earlier. I mean, it worked for Trent Reznor in his Downward Spiral album, so fuck it, why not? Anyway, he quickly notices that this may have actually been a pretty good idea because some weird fucking shit starts happening pretty much immediately after coming into the house. And while he starts to write his story, he starts to find out what actually might be lurking in the house along with him and his daughter. They Live Inside Us is not the movie that I expected it to be. Is it a scary movie? Yes, it absolutely has parts that fall into the scary movie framework. However, this movie has a sense of humor that I wasn't expecting as well. But it is kind of schizophrenic because at times the movie has this biting sense of humor that I really appreciate. And then at others, there's like no sense of humor whatsoever. It's just straight up horrifying. But it did keep me on my toes, I will say that much. The vast majority of the humor in this movie comes from Jake's writing attempts. As he starts to write things down on the page, or type them, we start to see these things manifested on the screen in kind of like an old grungy 80s or 70s horror movie kind of way. These parts of the movie were great fun. We see like the same character put through all these different situations that are very traditional horror movie tropes. Like the insane clown chasing a woman through a carnival, or like a scarecrow coming through and chasing somebody, or the masked Jason Voorhees-esque killer. I really enjoyed these parts of the movie, and it does a really good job of showing you when that's going on. There's like all this film grain and everything that shows up on there, and it's kind of hokey like those older horror movies were. But it's never making fun of these types of movies. These parts of the movie are very much more a homage or a callback to those old retro horror movies. You can tell that the filmmakers here have an absolute love of those old school grungy horror movies like Friday the 13th, The Nightmare on Elm Street, and Halloween. And while these parts of the movie aren't like total laugh fests or anything, typically they end with kind of a comedic take on everything that's going on in this certain section of the movie. And then there's the rest of the movie that is much more straight up haunted house scary movie. The juxtaposition between the old school retro kind of ha-ha looks at the movie and then the holy shit, this is actually pretty fucking scary parts of the movie are very well done. It did keep things interesting. It wasn't like one single tone. The whole movie wasn't like all down and drab and just scary at every turn. No, it's broken up with these parts of the writing and seeing that stuff on screen. It was all really refreshing. I mean, yeah, we've seen people writing things before and it play out on screen, but put into this context, it was kind of a new thing. Now about those other parts of the movie, the haunted house parts, the central part of the movie, how was that? Well, pretty genuinely fucking creepy. That's how it was. One of the things that made this movie creepier than some other movies, in my opinion, was the house. In a lot of movies like this, the characters enter into like this ginormous fucking house that I will never ever own in my life. It might have some scary parts in it, some things jump out at you and oh my and all that shit, but I don't really feel a connection to it because I'm most likely never gonna own a fucking mansion. So the fact that this movie takes place in, yes, a bit of a larger house, but not an insanely large house. This is a house that I could very much see myself stepping foot in at some time in my lifetime, or even actually living in. This isn't some insanely huge, unbelievable house. This is a house that's very believable. The rooms, the hallways, the living spaces, they're all things that are very similar to what I'm used to. So when these weird, creepy these scary things are happening in this house, it does hit home a bit more to me. This is believable because this is on a common ground. This is turf that I understand. When the guy goes flying out into the hallway because something's going on in this room, and it's kind of a narrow, smaller hallway, or really just a normal sized hallway, and not some ginormous fucking high school sized hallway, then I relate with that. You don't have a lot of room to move in hallways. My hallway upstairs is pretty fucking narrow. I ain't like running around side to side in it. You go from here to there. It serves its purpose, that's all it is, and that's what they do in this movie. I know it seems like a small thing, but this was one of the things I noticed that really made me relate more with the terrifying aspects of this movie, because I could see these things happening in my own home. Now let's talk about them things that happen. There's not a tremendous amount of things that we actually see on screen. There are some things, but this movie is much more concerned with mood than what you actually see. We see some fleeting glimpses of things and some stuff just right out of frame, but like full on seeing something coming at you, monsters and things like that, not a whole lot of that. In the parts of the movie that are supposed to be like real life. In the actual movie writing scenes, you see a whole bunch of that shit. So it's kind of like you get the best of both worlds here. And that is something that this movie did very well. It built a great mood. There's a constant foreboding feel in this movie that just makes you feel like something's watching the characters at every turn. And the filmmakers did a great job with the overall mood of the film. Now the payoff of the movie is gonna leave some people a bit split, I think. I myself, I was okay with it. I thought it was pretty good, but I do have some questions, I will say that much. However, I do think there will be some people that are left there saying, what? Not like, what? I don't understand what happened, more like a, what? That's it? But that's probably pretty much any ending of any movie like this. You're gonna have people that like it, you're gonna have people that don't. Me, myself, with this one, I was into it, it was pretty good. Now, the vast majority of the performances in this movie are of James Morris's Jake and his daughter Danny, played by Emily Bruskinski. Now, overall, I think they do a pretty good job. However, there are a few parts where things are a bit awkward. Bruskinski and Morris both come across as pretty genuine and earnest for the most part. However, there are a couple of parts where there is a bit of overacting that does take you out for a minute. It's nothing too bad, but it is there. It's just a few interactions that seem a little stiff. Also, this has nothing to do with the performance of Morris at all in the slightest, and this isn't really even a bad thing, but this dude looks just like fucking Elijah Wood. Like the whole time I kept thinking that this is like Elijah Wood's cousin or uncle or long lost brother or something. Every time he popped on screen, I was like, holy fuck, Elijah Wood's in this movie. But no, it was this James Morris guy. I mean, like I said, nothing bad, but it's there. I couldn't help but stop thinking that throughout this whole movie. I mean, I don't think that should be taken as a bad thing. Elijah Wood's pretty fucking famous, so there you go, Mr. Morris. You look like a really fucking famous guy. I mean, if nothing else, it could possibly get you laid at some point. Just saying. Overall, the performances are pretty good. I mean, yes, as I mentioned, there are a few stiff moments, but as a whole, everything here is pretty workable. Nothing's like terrible or anything like that. From a technical standpoint, this movie is looking really damn good. For a lower budget film, it just overall looks really nice. And while it's not a special effects extravaganza, what's here seems to be all practical. And all those practical effects look really nice. The creature designs that we get are all pretty legit. While the vast majority of them all do kind of play on tropes of other horror movie icons, I did like the way they went with them. They all do have a bit of their own personality, while still calling back to those horror movie icons that they're remembering. When it comes to gore, the movie's not really that gory, but it's not really that kind of movie either. There is a little bit of the red stuff, but it never gets too out there. This isn't a gore fest by any means. But like I said a minute ago, this isn't that kind of movie. It's much more interested in mood and atmosphere. And that is what they concentrate on, and in that they do a very good job here. Guys, at the end of the day, They Live Inside Us was a pretty entertaining ride. There are a couple of stiff performances in a few scenes, and the ending is going to be pretty divisive. But the story as a whole is pretty entertaining and intriguing. And I really liked how they had the old school horror movie sections of the movie mixed in there to give it a fresh feel. The movie looks great, is moody as fuck, and has a wonderful atmosphere, and is absolutely worth a rent.
All he wanted was, hey, this.
I have to return some videotape.
If you're looking for a solid little horror movie for the night, and especially if you have an affinity for those late 70s, early to mid 80s horror movies, then check out They Live Inside Us and you won't be disappointed. So there it is, guys, my review of They Live Inside Us. If you enjoyed and want more content like this, hit that subscribe button and help my little channel grow. If you liked what I had to say, give me a like. If not, let me know in the comments below why. And as always, stay sexy, Provo.
You ever get tired doing the same thing over and over and over?
Like I mentioned in the review, one of the best parts of this movie is the visualization we get of this guy's writings. He even has like a list of movie monsters to pick from before he starts trying to write each story. It really reminded me of like Cabin in the Woods when they had that list of monsters and they were trying to guess which one was gonna come out and get who went. Before he starts writing each time, he's like going up and down this list and then he like picks one and comes up with a story surrounding this old school type of monster. And he had this big like long ass list, but we only get to see a few of them. I do wonder if there's like a director's cut or some cut scenes where we got to see more of these monsters, because I really want to see more of these motherfuckers. I mean, I want to know what else was there. Were there any other ones shot or at least conceptualized in any way? What else could we have seen? In true Cabin in the Woods fashion, was the merman one of them? I mean, even if it wasn't, just say yeah, sure it was. I mean, I'll take that.